All right, man. Here we are.
I'm
We're in
so
the
excited to
van.
be here. Thank you for.
So this is
doing
this is a long. I mean, we've known each other. Obviously, families grew up together.
Yeah.
New brothers, new sisters.
Mhm.
Jerry.
Down the street.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you live on, Cowan?
Yeah, Cowan.
Kentwood.
Yeah, Kentwood.
Yeah, hold it down.
No, I know.
That's right.
I'll never forget delivering pizza to your place on the Super Bowl. One of my
right.
off-season
That's
jobs.
pretty good.
Yeah, you guys were having a big old party. It was fantastic.
That's iconic. Yeah, and you're mentioning the bullpens. You have no idea how much cool I assigned myself to be able to catch you in that part of your career. You know, it's just like, guys, I gotta go catch Keith. So
Little did you know that was the peak of my career, and it wasn't going any better.
just happy to be a part of it.
Yeah.
You know,
Jeez. So tell me about your career, man. Your story, your baseball story. When did it start? What was what got you into it?
I mean, we probably started in a lot of the same places.
Yeah.
Westchester Park, T-ball.
Yeah.
As early as you can sign up, you know.
Yeah.
And then it quickly became a Delray American Little League thing.
Yep.
But, you know, I look back to that time, and just the way I remember it is as early as I could make decisions. It seemed like one of those decisions was that I wanted to play professional baseball.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of my first significant thoughts, it seems like. And so that sort of informed the next 20 years of my life, you know, like I know you can relate, like every decision sort of pointed my arrows in that direction. And I think if I scan my environment at that time, it definitely had much less to do with my ability. I don't think I was physically mature or talented in any real notable way. But I definitely, as I kind of scan my environment in those early years, I definitely had, I think, more insight as to what behaviors would lend myself to getting better at this than my peers.
Yeah.
Meaning, like, I was, you know, hundreds of swings a day, kind of self-driven practice guy. And so, yeah, that sort of colored my whole childhood, really.
And so that started early then, because I know some people that starts at 18, but...
Oh, no. I was a maniac at, like, 9.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Makes all the sense in the world then.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I'm trying to date myself, so to speak, I remember... What's like the first year of like majors in Little League? 10. Yeah, so 10, first draft pick or whatever, you know, like kind of moment. And then they did the hit-a-thon there, you know, remember exactly. The hit-a-thon?
Yeah.
I think it was like 5 swings or something, and you add up all the feet and try to raise money for the thing.
Yeah.
And I think I hit 4 home runs out of 5 or something crazy, you know, like got lucky / had been practicing a bunch. And I remember one of the parents came up to me in what I would now recognize today as like a sort of condescending tone, was like, "Oh, like when did you get to be such a good hitter, Logan?" Like one of those little pat on the head kind of things.
Exactly.
And I remember being, whatever age you said, 10, and kind of being a little bit ruthless, you know. And I didn't really know how to answer, because what I wanted to say was like, I've been practicing this whole time. Like, that's how. Pal or whatever, you know. And so, yeah, I remember just really early being pretty
locked in,
intense about it. Yeah.
And so you go from there to high school. You know, is the high school experience the same thing, or how does that go for you?
Yeah. So my high school program, I think, was different than probably yours was. We talked about it a little bit, but I went to St. Monica's up the road here, like 3 miles north of here, and our field is actually just behind us at the end of the street, Marine Park, which is a trip. You know, it was one of those programs, like really low division 4 or 5 CIF kind of thing, where, you know, if you wanted to play and you were old enough, you probably would make the team kind of thing. And so high school always was a little bit of a downtime, you know. He kind of just did the thing. And then in the off season, I was pretty active, like 2 or 3 teams all the time.
So club stuff,
scout ball, Connie Mac, like every denomination you could kind of play, and I remember, I'm just thinking of all this stuff now. I remember, some of the language was like, like catcher for hire kind of thing. I mean, the position, you're a premium position guy as well. It's one of those things where it's a highly skilled thing, and if you're willing to do it at a certain level, you kind of always have a job. So I definitely was very poor at saying no at that time in my life. So I used to keep a note card. 1 or 2 years, I kept a note card and tallied every game I played, and I think I played 148 games, like as a 16-year-old.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah. Like that. Yeah. So like triple headers on Saturdays and changing uniforms in your bag, and just it was pretty full on.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. High school was kind of chill though.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. So it sounds like your club is where maybe college saw you. I mean, I know you go on to San Diego. Is that they see you at club or they see you at St. Monica's?
Yeah, I just heard Coach Valenzuela, who's the head coach at Long Beach State.
Yeah,
he was our pitching coach at the University of San Diego, where I ended up going, and I was able to speak to their team, and it was a trip hearing him describe the story of recruiting me through his eyes, all these years later, and so. Yeah, I kind of got a refresher on that. Basically, I was catching at Southwest College.
Okay.
For a scout ball game, I was on the White Sox scout team, and he was there to see another player, and I kind of just blocked well and maybe overachieved a little bit one day. And so, yeah, he gave me a look. University of San Diego was, it was the lowest scholarship offer I got. But there, for whatever reason, seemed like alignment for me.
Yeah.
As an athlete and as an academic, it seemed to fit well.
Yeah.
And I can't underscore enough easily the best decision like I've ever made.
Okay.
I almost fear who I would have become going somewhere else. There's almost no way that I'm this person.
That's interesting. So why was that the best decision? What about San Diego made it the right place?
So for a bit of context, San Diego then was sort of like this mid-major Division I program that, would hang out in the top 25. They'll win a bunch of WCC kind of titles. Them and Pepperdine will kind of go back and forth. And that was like the shtick.
Yeah.
And there was an alignment of planets and stars, and the whole thing sort of created this magical moment for those years, 2005, 6, 7, 8, or the years I was there, where culturally something happened there that if you could bottle it, it would be priceless just for any organization. And it was this alignment of incredible talent, overachievement, ridiculous commitment to the mission.
Yeah.
And and so by the end of that deal, we were, kind of unceremoniously, my last year there, I think we were ranked 4th in the country, a national seed to like beeline to Omaha.
Yeah.
Probably the best pitching staff in the country, at least one of those years. And we were just really doing things that on paper like should have been impossible.
Yeah.
Really like transcended ourselves a bit. And being a part of that was like, I don't know, the most transformative thing I've ever experienced. And it's literally in my words and in my behavior like every day.
Really?
Every day.
And so when you're working at the gym right now, when you're running, multiple different gyms, is it Coach Hill? I mean, what?
Coach Hill's a big part of it.
Yeah.
I would take a bullet for that guy. Coach Hill means a lot to me. And, but here's the thing is there are folks who walk alongside a path similar to yours, similar to mine, that have different experiences. They come out on the other end and they're kind of like, "Oh, I didn't really get that lesson or memo or whatever." So yeah, it was also the people. You know, our crew decided to have agency over like our story. You know, we were going to decide how things were going to be.
Yeah.
And so much of that is I can attribute to Coach Hill. But yeah, it was a special moment in time. And here's really where it started. I can say for a fact, I've said this before, that the opening team meeting in my freshman year, which, you know, folks who listen to this know what that's like. You know, you're just literally trying to remember everything and not die.
Yeah, not get yelled at. Yeah.
Yeah, and life's moving fast. And I remember sitting in that room, and Coach Hill came in, and I was able to do this thing for whatever reason that set the tone for the lessons that I would learn over those 4 years, where I sat in that chair, and it became so crystal clear to me that this gentleman was going to walk into the room and he was going to address 30 kids.
Yeah.
Whose our performances would decide his livelihood.
Yeah.
And it's like a rules meeting, you know. Here's the thing. Here's what to expect. Here's how we do things. And I realized in that moment I was able to put myself in his shoes, and it felt like, oh, this is how you run a company.
Yeah.
Like, this is how you lead a group of people, because all of these variables are at his disposal. Like, to be start practice at 7 or 8, or facial hair or no, or socks up, socks down. Right? All of these variables were sort of at his disposal, and we as a group were going to assign meaning about how to win. And it was like at such a high level that it just kind of like knocked me on my ass. And I felt like I learned business that day, you know, and then over the course of the next 4 years, I learned like winning. I learned the sport. It was just really, really powerful.
And so that's awesome, man. I mean, I think, you know, I go back to that same meetings with Coach Lopez and Coach McMahon at Florida, and it's the same thing. You're so petrified. You know, I at least I was so petrified I didn't want to be called out, so I would just be locked in. But I think it's impressive that at that age you can understand kind of the other side of it too. Like, know what he's going through and know why he's implementing all these things. Where I think when I was at Florida, I was like, dude, 7 a.m. really, 5:50 weights, like, what are we doing here? But that's awesome. You know, that age to know that. Yeah.
I mean, and I mean, I'm sure we'll get there, but you know, I'm not a ball player anymore, right? Yeah. And I think from the seat that I sit in now, I can realize that if you have the right vehicle, like the right environment to learn these lessons, all roads kind of lead to the same places, right? Like, was that meeting about winning baseball games, or is it different than winning football games? Or is it different than like making more money this quarter than last quarter, right? Like, what's the difference here? And there's not a ton of differences, but sport does an incredible job of creating these feedback loops. You know, we have the rules. We assign meaning to these things. Like 30 dudes and 5 coaches decided their whole life depends on how to do this thing. Yeah, and it's arbitrary. Yeah. But when you assign that much meaning, and the feedback is so tight, and the consequences are so great, you can do incredible things. Like, you can iterate, you can improve. It's incredible. And then you transition outside of that environment. You know, I remember, I don't want to flash forward too far, but my career wasn't that long. So, you know, after baseball, you kind of come out into the real world, and you're sort of I was looking for a similar type of environment. And I realized that most adults were not even in the arena. Yeah. You know, it was just like, oh my God, like, this is going to be so easy. You know, and I don't think most people have that experience.
No, but that's a common refrain, like the importance of what we've learned as baseball players. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, understanding you have to show up every day. Like, you have to be on time. You have to look the part. You know, if you guys are a socks up program, your socks are up. And it's it's something that you can kind of buy into an environment and a culture and thrive in it versus, some people don't like that. They're just like, I've been my own agent my whole life. I'm not going to buy into this thing you're trying to get me to do. And so they can kind of push back a little bit where, I think we're kind of used to that.
Yeah, they can push back, but what I would say is you can't argue with results, right?
Yeah.
So if you're an individual that's of a certain age, 20, 30, 40, 50 years old, and you can't work at a high level on a team, that's an interesting prize to win for pushing back on that, right? Like, the best of luck to you.
Yeah, exactly. It ain't happening, right?
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, solid start. Like, I'll see you out there. We'll be over here.
I know, I agree, man. All right, so you got San Diego, and it sounds like, even from talking to you and knowing you all these years, it sounds like that was just such a seminal time in your life. What was transitioning into pro ball like?
Pro ball was sort of unceremonious in a lot of ways, like in my head, I was always, probably still to this day, the ego turns up the volume on my reality. You know what I mean? In high school, I thought I was better than I was. In college, I thought I was better than I was. That sort of served me in a lot of ways. And so in high school, I thought it was cool to like have an agent and talk to scouts on the phone about stuff that didn't happen. And then junior year, draft came and went, and I wasn't selected. So I was like, oh, that wasn't part of my story. You know. And so this thing in my head where I was this prospect, future big league catcher, turned into just a different thing altogether. I remember first day of the draft came and went, and I was like, this is weird. Like, did you guys forget? Like, you guys need my number?
Pretty good player here down in San Diego.
I can hit balls far. Like, you guys, and so, yeah, I think that the arc of my career was, I was a better, numbers-wise, a better player as a freshman in college than I was a senior in some ways. I had more power and things like that, but the guy that was drafted I didn't really have the clout or the money behind me to come into pro ball with a whole bunch of swagger. Yeah. So I was trying to overachieve and, find a big league career in a story that it didn't seem like, anybody else believed in that. Yeah. So yeah, pro ball was hard. There's one moment kind of worth mentioning, which is I'm on the foul line warming up before, the 30th game of my first pro career, and I'm like 10,000 yard stare, just like looking across the field at the other team warming up, and I've got a few kind of like weeks under our belt here in like the life of pro ball. I'm in Eugene, Oregon.
Yeah.
And
with the Padres.
Yeah, and I'm just kind of like not eating so good and like drinking too much, and it's just not as fun as you'd hope, and there's not as many fans as you'd think, and it's harder than you think. Yeah. And my college team could beat the living hell out of the team that I'm on right now. Yeah. And just weird stuff like that. And I'm looking across the field, and I remember being like, in high school, I wanted to be here.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God. Like, thank God I wasn't here the last 4 years.
Yeah.
And it was this like switch in my mind of like, I am so grateful that I had that college experience, because I would have been on this foul line feeling this way through what I would identify like the best developmental years of my life. And I was like, oh, my God, and and there's weird things that I align myself with chronologically. I played with probably like 5 first rounders. My 2004 was my senior year. Mm-hmm. Delman Young, Trevor Plouffe. I don't know who else was in that list, but I think of Trevor Plouffe a lot, who is, I think, a supplemental first round pick.
Yep.
And at the time that I was standing on that foul line, he was in AAA. And I was like, that's a situation where if you're him, you sign 100% of the time. He got $1 million, and you got to do it, no questions about it. I go, but he would have been out. He's still not a major league player.
and he didn't have that experience at San Diego.
And I'm like, what are these kids thinking? Like, I wanted to go back and just like yell from the mountaintops, like, don't do it, you know? And so that is sort of what was coming up for me in pro ball, you know? And then you go back, you know, spring training is like a bloodbath. You feel like you're going to lose your job every day. And it's just, it starts to get pretty real.
Plus, for catchers, you're catching, 8 bullpens a day? I mean, it is a grind. I mean, it's a grind for everybody, but for catchers, it's a whole different grind.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely in spring training where I was like, oh, I think I caught one pitch in a bullpen in spring training, and I threw it back, and I put my mask up, and I'm literally saying in my head out loud, really? Like this position? You know, it was just like kind of a tongue-in-cheek comment. I love the position, but it was just like, I totally get why they say, hey, like your hitting comes down or whatever. I was like, I can't move. Like I've been doing this since 8 a.m., you know, and it is a grind. One that like, it's hard to acknowledge without sounding like you're just whining about it, but it's crazy. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. No, I know. And the thing is too, like you bring up that, and then you don't even mention the travel and the other things that can wear you down. And you mentioned earlier the bad food, you know, the tendency to find any vice just to kind of keep the sanity. So
totally.
I mean, that's real. That's the way it is.
Yeah, I mean, looking back, I'm not an alcoholic as far as I know. I don't really drink much, but then I did, and I think looking back, just with a little bit of distance and reflection, it's like I don't really know the difference between that behavior and alcoholism. Like I'm not a doctor, but like I'm kind of looking back, I'm like, that seems pretty on par with, you know, the thing. And I sort of realize now what a coping mechanism that was. And it was less about like, surely some of it was like managing stress, allegedly, you know, but the main thing that I recognize looking back now was it's such a Groundhog Day vibe, which, you know, it's talked about often, and it really is. But I think coming home from doing the routine over, you get home back to the room at 11 or whatever at night, and it was like, I think the feeling that comes up is I remember the feeling of like, well, if I go to bed now, then we just do this again sooner.
That's so funny. I'm the same way.
You know?
You almost needed like your free time. Like these are my free hours to be a human being.
Yeah. You're like, so if who knows what'll happen tonight?
Yeah.
Was like such a reprieve.
Yeah.
From being like, well, if I go to bed now, then I'm going to open my eyes and it's early outs again.
Yeah, exactly. I'm back at the field before you know it. Yeah.
You know, and it's weird. And
as much as you love the game, like I think that's kind of indisputable. We all love the game at some point if we're going that far, but there's also the feeling of you don't feel like you have much autonomy in your life during season. It's like everything is kind of controlled early out. So the bus is at this time, and again, stuff that helps you later, but when you're going through it sometimes it's like, man, just give me a day off, and you get 2 a month, and
they don't feel like days off.
No, they don't. Yeah. They're catch up.
I know a lot more now about like the body and the mind and things like that, and that I just was ignorant to then. And I recognize there's a lot about my personality that added sort of stress to that situation. Something that really served me was mentally preparing, you know, rehearsing these things going into it. You know, I didn't realize early in my career that by the time I got to the field or in the batter's box, like I'd just been there so many times that it's difficult to shut down, you know? So they say kind of like the model athlete in terms of the nervous system, the disposition, it's kind of like a funny way to think about it, is the model athlete is like the house dog, right? Which all day long is just like hanging out, sleeping.
Really?
You know, yes. Well, follow me. So under the tree or like, you know, next to the couch, hanging like lazy almost.
Yeah.
And then the mailman comes to the door and bang, I'm going, right?
Yeah.
I am charging to the door, right? Attack, whatever. And then shut it down, right? And then, oh, dad's home. Yeah. And then shut it down. And because that balance of the nervous system, sympathetic is like the active performance state, parasympathetic is like recovery state, and being able to upregulate and downregulate quickly is sort of it. But if I have a game at 7 o'clock and my whole livelihood and my dreams and everything about who I am for the last 20 years depends on my performance at 7 o'clock, what do you think I'm doing at 11 a.m.?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm obsessing over 7 o'clock.
Yep.
And so you're bathing in this sympathetic, stressful zone, and I didn't really have the skills to shut it down.
Yeah. That's interesting. So it's funny you mention that, because there were a couple of years in a row, and I'm not BSing you, I watched the movie Joe Dirt before every start. And the whole reason was it was so dumb, and I like the movie, like I do like the movie, but it got to the point where it was so autopilot mentally that it would allow me to turn off for a little bit, because it's the same thing. And
it's really
again,
smart.
like I didn't throw 97, we weren't first round picks, so we had to perform all the time. It wasn't like you could have a couple bad months and they'd be patient with you.
Right.
We had to be on from day one. So every start felt like game 7 in a lot of ways. So that was the only way to do it. Didn't realize what I was doing at the time. It was just
that's
more
smart.
of like need a blow, need a little bit of a break here.
That's really smart. Yeah, and usually, not all the time, but usually when the results matter enough, like water, we will find best practices. Yeah. Right. So you didn't need to read a book about the nervous system to figure out that like there's something about me that wants to watch Joe Dirt for the 48th time. It's
I know, right?
Really well done.
Could darn well rehearse the movie at that point.
Yeah. I thought drinking a glass of bourbon after every game would be the best way to do that. That's not that smart.
There's your parasympathetic not working.
Yeah, fail.
Yeah,
for sure.
That's funny. Okay, so you're with the Padres. Take me through is it, how long are you with them? What's the ending like?
Yeah, so I'm there 2 seasons basically. I left for short season A ball my first year.
Yep.
And then my second year, I left spring training almost like accidentally. I think there was an injury in the big leagues, and then a shift happened. So I went to Double-A San Antonio to help out.
Yeah.
I didn't really play or do anything other than just be there in case something happened, I think. And then came back to Arizona, and then went to High A in Lake Elsinore, California League. And then that's where my career ended. At the end of 2009, California League, at the very end of the season, we had an off day. I was going to make a few extra bucks doing like a Nike photo shoot over at Fullerton.
Yeah.
Literally on the freeway driving there. And I got a call. Hey, we don't need you. And that was it. And it was like so anticlimactic, so
sudden.
Just... But, part of me was like, that checks out, like I'm hitting like 199, you know what I mean? Like I just wouldn't even know how to get a hit if I,
Yeah, it's a painful game.
Try to hit left-handed or something, And then I went home to my parents' house, who had since moved to San Diego. And I think in my head what my plan was to sort of act as if I was still a professional baseball player in the off season, and then I was going to make a decision about what I was going to do at some point that off season. And a couple teams reached out, about a minor league deal, and in my mind, I just knew that was a role. I'm a catcher. Like I could find a job helping out in a low A or high A team somewhere, but the reason why I was doing this was to be a major league player.
Yeah.
So if that's not the point,
exactly.
then I don't need to tell my friends I'm a professional baseball player, like for conversation's sake.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit controversial. It's kind of not the play till they take the jersey off your back idea. And so in my mind, I sort of made that decision internally, and I think I waited months and months till I verbalized that to anyone, like my parents. I told them, And I think it was harder to tell them than it was to tell myself that I was done. But as I look back, I feel quite grateful that I was able to give this thing everything I have, and then also transition kind of early.
Yeah.
You know, I have buddies who are sort of in purgatory in a role that, you know, based on the movements around the system, they were not going to be a big league player no matter what happened. You know, phantom DL, all kinds of crazy things, right? But they're not a quitter.
Yeah.
So they're, you know, 5 or 6 years of their life is gone, so to speak.
Yeah,
right?
and it's interesting you bring that up, the not a quitter, and the concept of play till they take the uniform off your back. And I'm sure you've heard that a million times. I heard it a million times in locker rooms, like, you know, I'm going nowhere until they take it from me. And so, you know, those are valuable years you've lost going for something that maybe you'd never had a chance for. That's where you really hit an interesting point, because that is a true thing. Like, they're guys that are organizational guys that will never sniff it no matter what happens.
Yeah, there's two things I want to say about that, and at least one of them might be a little controversial. You know, so the first thing is, it's unfortunate that, and I don't want this to sound like a sob story, but it's unfortunate that in that role, in that job, no one, and I mean no one, except maybe another player, wants to hear how it's brutal and maybe you don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
You can't come home to your hometown and be like, guys,
pro baseball.
Everyone's living through you.
Yeah.
They're like, I don't want to hear that. You're living the dream. Don't you ever, you know, it's the vibe, right? Whether it's spoken or unspoken. Pretty controversial. And the second thing I wanted to say about that is maybe more impactful, less controversial. Because as you started to say that, some guys are like, I'm going to play to the very moment I can't. Part of me wanted to say, you know, for some guys, it's such a judgmental thing. For some guys, they should, you know. And what's behind my desire to say that is maybe more important, which is, for many people, they've never once considered life beyond the sport. And for good reason. Because it doesn't really feel like you can do that. You probably shouldn't, actually.
Yeah, you shouldn't.
You want to be the best in the world at something. You can't really also think about your, you know, architecture firm that you want to make after. You can't really split your time like that. But I want to offer a compromise. Not really a compromise. Another option.
Yeah.
Right? Which is not moving about your career with like a plan B. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But to be able to imagine an existence after baseball in a way that doesn't get in the way of your ability to execute your job now.
Yeah.
Meaning not a hedge against what it might be like to not make it. No, for sure. Go after it, 100%, 150%, empty the tank as if you're going to make it, because that's your only chance. But also entertain that someday in the future, you will be something else.
Yeah.
Maybe you're 60 years old or 70 or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I say that is a thing that I didn't know would set me up for success in ways that I can't really add up on paper.
Yeah.
Because I knew after I was a professional player, which I could see in the big leagues till I'm 40 years old, after that, I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So the moment that I got fired from baseball, even though I didn't have the details sorted out, it was now time to realize this other thing. Whereas if you don't have any imagery of that, then like most players, you're on an island when your career's over, you know? And it's life-saving in a lot of ways to envision that, you know, envision what that is. And not to like go crazy deep or whatever, but there's strong like science to support that. You know, one of the most read books of all time, A Man's Search for Meaning. You know, Viktor Frankl is a survivor of the Holocaust, and he observes folks who sort of died of quote unquote natural causes in the Holocaust in these concentration camps were in a period of time during the Holocaust where all they were doing was imagining this period and when it would be over. Right? Their whole focus was consumed on that. And of course the stressor of being in that environment is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like we can't even understand. But they would start to, in their mind, create these frameworks like, if we just make it to December, like the war will be over. Mm-hmm. And they'd put all their sort of mental eggs in that basket. And then December would come and it wouldn't be over. And it would be just like demoralizing. And it would kill their will, basically.
Yeah, for sure.
And he found that the people who fared the best were folks that were like, this period of time in the life cycle of my life is a period of time, and it will be over at some point. I don't know when, and I'm not really going to take responsibility for that, but I can imagine sometime in the future living in a village with grandkids, and I don't know when or how, but that's in the future. That like view of the world allowed them to survive these horrible environments, and I'm not attributing the Holocaust to baseball or whatever, but it is a period of time in your life, and if you can imagine another period of your time, then when it's over, it's much less traumatic.
Yeah, that's interesting. And we've assigned, I know I battled with this as well. Maybe not you, maybe you didn't as well, but you assign yourself, you're a baseball player. Like, so if you don't imagine yourself not being a baseball player, that's a tough pill to swallow. And that's something that I know I've had to kind of make amends with at some point and try to go different routes. But yeah, that's ongoing. For some
sure.
people.
And the mind wants to simplify in this sort of, let me say, a regressive mind wants to simplify things, this thing included, into like an either or scenario. Mm-hmm. Well, like, which is it? Like, are you a committed baseball player or are you this other thing?
Yeah.
And like, that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm calling for like this level up, which is both. Yeah. I am a committed baseball player who will also do this other thing.
That's a great point. Yeah.
And we should just kind of be on the prowl for when the mind wants to do this either or thing. It's never true.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be.
Doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
I agree. Okay, so when did the gym come up? Now you own multiple gyms.
Yeah.
Deuce, it's super popular in Southern California. Some of my players train with you right now, which is awesome, by the way. But when did that idea kind of formulate?
So after, kind of just segueing with what we were talking about, after I got done playing, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I didn't even care in what lane or what it was or whatever. I just really liked the freedom and responsibility and rigor of this ultimate kind of skin in the game thing. Yeah. It felt like heavy consequence adulthood. You know what I mean? It felt like highly competitive real life, non-sport life. And so I really just took this time after I got released to introspect and figure out like what I believed in, what my values were. I just read a billion books and just kind of got after it internally.
Yeah.
And just sort of started to prioritize ideas in my head about what a business idea would be. And I had a lot of ideas that didn't come to fruition, like this fire protection company and like all this stuff that never happened. But pretty soon the list of ideas started to see this like gym climbing to the top. Mm-hmm. And the idea was I was really taken aback by the juxtaposition of performance in like major American sport, like at the highest level, and then fitness. And it just seemed odd to me that what we were doing looked nothing like what is being sold in this billion-dollar industry of fitness.
Yeah.
And like one of those camps has results and the other camp has none.
Yeah.
Right? And the United States of America, we spend more money every year on fitness, and we are sicker every year.
Yeah.
And it's a bizarre paradox. So I figured that I could really communicate great strength and conditioning to the general population. And that the idea would be to create these gym experiences where regular people go to be coached, not unlike a college or professional athlete might. Not pretending that they're athletes, but great training is simple. It's great training.
Yeah.
And so I went to my former strength coach at the University of San Diego and asked him, I'm going to move back to LA. I have this business plan for this gym. Who can I go learn from? And he sent me to meet a guy called Andy Petronic in Santa Monica.
Nice.
And looking back, there couldn't have been a better place to go, because in the world of kind of micro gyms, strength and conditioning gyms, CrossFit gyms, etc., there was this boom. I was able to observe this rise in popularity of what I would call like the third wave of fitness. Mm-hmm. And, he just so happened to be a person who was a business first that happened to be a gym business. Whereas most of the people in that micro gym camp were very passionate about fitness, but it was a passion project masquerading as a business.
Yeah.
And so
you saw results accordingly.
Yeah, who better to learn from? So I interned with him for several years, and then the gym started. What is now Deuce Gym started in the park in Santa Monica. So me and a guy called Danny Leslie would drive our pickup trucks out to the park twice a day, every day, for like 2.5 years, building this quote unquote air quotes gym. And we were just trying to convince anyone who would listen that this was like a training facility, and it was a patch of grass in the park. So we had a nice website, but no address kind of thing. And then so that was in 2011 that started, and then moved here to the Venice location in 2013. And because of the structure of this organization is very developmental in nature. That's what most of my work is teaching developmental organizations is, in this context, is half of what we do is sell fitness, and the other half of what we do is develop leadership, specifically in coaches. And so there are folks in our coaches development program, and it allows us to grow. That's the reason why we have more locations and we're able to do cool things.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when you look at how you develop coaches, are there certain coaches from your time playing? Like what attributes are you looking for?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's definitely some cultural things that show up every day, like I said, every day in my life, based on what you learn when you get a group of people together who, in their minds, have dedicated their entire being to accomplish the same task. Mm-hmm. And that serves us every single day. What really colors what I do most specifically is a hybrid between the sort of skin in the game, how do I win more than my opponent at the highest level from baseball, and then a support structure from the world of academia. Because while I was at the University of San Diego, I was fortunate enough with like extra credits and whatnot to sort of finagle a minor in leadership studies. Yeah. And University of San Diego built a leadership school coincidentally as I was there, and I got to benefit from that program. Yeah. And long story made shorter, my senior year was the first year of the universal start date. So at the University of San Diego, traditionally we would have the first Division I baseball games of the year because of the weather. Okay. So we'd host like, Cal Poly or somebody at like the last weekend in January. Oh, wow. Right? Yeah. Crazy, right? Yeah. Where most schools it's like, snowing and whatever. Yeah. So the NCAA gathered that like, well, if your school is in a certain geographical place, you have this advantage to where you can just play at home a bunch. So they pushed the universal start date to March. And that changed things because you'd play the same amount of games in less time. long story short, the capstone course of this leadership minor, it was called Leadership Seminar. It was like this 3-hour course, and you had to do it last in order to graduate with a minor. Basically conflicted with every game and every practice. So I was going to have to come back in order to finish the program. So I basically went to the administration and said, hey, I'm a baseball player here at the university. My commitment to the university is specifically getting in my way to finish this course. Can I do an independent study? Can you make it harder? Can we do something here? What are my options? And they were kind of like, can't help you, not really sure, didn't know we had a baseball team, whatever. And so I kept running into roadblocks there trying to finish this course, and long story short, one of my last-ditch efforts to speak to the administration had me walking out of the building kind of dejected when I passed a desk in the building, and it just so happened to be of the professor who was teaching the course, Dr. Miller. And so she happened to be sitting there, and I asked if I could have a moment of her time, and I explained my story. And she didn't tell me until like 8 or 9 years later, but she said, let me see what I can do, and I'll get back to you. What she did was went to the administration and said, if we didn't build this building for people like this, I don't know why we built this building, so let me do this.
Yeah.
And so she basically went to bat for me and created an independent study where I finished this course like one-on-one with her.
Oh, that's amazing.
It was a very high-level experience. And so she's a dear friend of mine. She wrote the foreword of the book. She's we work together on projects, the seminar that I teach and consulting projects, and it's just been really incredible. And so she is a developmental psychologist and really operating at the tip of the spear of how the highest expression of teams and organizations work. She coaches folks like Ray Dalio and the high level folks. And so I feel like I'm in a unique position to have one foot in rigorous performance, was on the field, now it's in entrepreneurship, and one foot in this sort of like highly validated academic thing, right?
Yeah.
And so look, I own gyms, but it's sort of just another vehicle, right? Yeah. It's a vehicle to do this developmental thing. And so the secret kind of behind the curtain thing is that we're developing leadership at a high level.
And what, I guess, it's interesting because so many people get into business to make money, correct?
Yeah.
So why? Why do you want to develop leadership? Like, what about that is so intriguing to you? What motivates you to do that?
I don't think that there's any doubt in any of our minds, consciously or subconsciously, what our purpose is. And our purpose is to evolve. It can be spoken or unspoken, but in a very primal way, our job is to evolve.
Yeah.
Now, there are environments that really attribute or liken us to evolution, and they are environments with feedback that allow us to iterate, right? That's how like an organism would evolve, but that's how we evolve in a modern world, right? Well, when you say, hey, here's the game, there's 9 innings, there's 3 outs an inning, that's first base, that's second base, that's third base, this is home, this is what a strike is, this is what a ball is, yada, 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 ready, go. And you get 2 opposing groups that have assigned their whole being to winning this game, you get information faster.
Yeah.
And this is where development happens. This is why you see greatness on the field. Well, it's my view that there are other environments like sport that have a similar feedback loop, and business is one of them. I empty my bank account into this idea, and if I lose, I quote unquote die, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And so it is an environment to iterate in these ways. And the beauty in that is you can accomplish incredible things that are in service to yourself and your community. But built inside of that is this feedback loop of growing kind of evolution. And the thing that makes us kind of tick and unique is we know how development works.
Yeah.
And so it is designed, that organization is designed by its own nature to get better over time. And so one of the benefits of that is you and I and every person who's listening to us talk right now can't unknow when we are growing and there's a certain sense of fulfillment there and purpose
I'd
there.
agree. Yeah.
And so if you can harness that, then you have a chance to like affect positive change and feel like a great deal of purpose in your life, you know. And so this is much less about muscles and making money. It's just kind of the vehicle to have the conversation.
Yeah, no, that's totally interesting. And you know, it's coaching. You always think of like baseball being the vehicle to help guys make life changes and prepare them for the next level. And you know, from my level, high school, you know, you're developing young men into hopefully men and husbands, fathers. So it's interesting to hear you say that, because I'd 100% agree. That's why we do certain things. And so, I mean, is that, when did Going Right, your book, start coming into fruition, so to speak?
Yeah, that came about in my mind in a moment that I sort of mentioned earlier, when I was kicked out into the real world, so to speak, right? Like athlete, you know, stepping out into, air quotes, the real world, and observing that I was surprised. I was surprised at how much most adults that I observe not only had conceded pursuing their peak expression, completely given up. They were doing a lot of like rationalizing why that was the reasonable thing to do. You know, like there's a lot of great reasons why you kind of mail it in and seek perceived certainty. And then when you get around communities and other people who are also doing that, there's a certain locking of arms, commiserating.
Exactly.
Hey man, hands are tied, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Got these kids, like
gotta pay the bills.
Yeah. And so we start to excuse ourselves like in mass. And so I observed that most people were not only conceding their peak expression, but they were really rationalizing this, like allegedly using logic to do so. And I felt so primed and so fit to take on the next chapter of my life because of how I attacked the previous chapter, that I sort of had this hypothesis that their logic was flawed.
Yeah.
And so I was like, you know what? It's not for a lack of pep rallies that we we don't have a lot of folks pursuing their peak expression. And so it's not this emotional, motivational talk that is why we're not doing this, right? Motivation is fleeting.
Yeah.
So I was like, it would be a great challenge to me to prepare a sort of bulletproof argument, for a logical argument for pursuing this peak expression, you know. And if I did that, then surely you could concede your best life, but you couldn't tell me you were being smarter for having done so.
Yeah.
And so I figured maybe there's no conversation more important than that one. So I sort of set out to do that, and I believe wholeheartedly that I was able to put together a watertight argument.
Yeah, it's solid. I've been reading it. It's really good.
Yeah, so that felt important to say.
Yeah.
You know.
And how's the reception been? Like when you're around a lot of people every day.
Yeah.
Obviously, do people realize that they've conceded, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think some folks do. They work harder to avoid facing this thing that we all are confronted with. I have a firm belief that no person is born and lives a life of any, substantial length and dies without considering, like, well, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And so some people, I think, just stave off that feeling better than others, or tamp it down more than others. But I think this is ever present in the back of all of our minds. And so, I'm not really fit to say this, but like Dr. Miller said, that unless you wrote this book, you need to read it, right? Yeah. Which is a pretty heavy recommendation about the universal nature of what I'm trying to say. And the response is very emotional.
Okay.
Because I think this is very close to home for people all the time. And I get messages every week from all around the world of people like sharing gnarly stuff, like, "Hey, me and my wife just quit our jobs," and I'm like, "Oh God," like, you know what I mean? And people are doing these things, and let me say this: as much as I wasn't really joking, but we were poking fun at this commiserating idea of like, "Hey, like, we're victims here. Like, we gotta just can't blame me.
Yeah,
You know what
exactly.
I mean? Like, get a good job. Like, I did it." There's a massive community, the largest community maybe in the world, of people locking arms and like validating this concession. And that's maybe the bad news. But the good news is, and this is sort of what the book can be for certain people, is there's also a community of people who are vulnerably going there, so to speak. And sometimes people need permission. They need like the hall pass to be like,
that's huge.
Send it.
Yeah.
And so for a lot of people, this is like the nudge to send it.
No, it's fantastic so far. And I mean, being that this is a baseball thing, I love how it starts on the field. When you realize how quickly, you talk about permission, when you say this is the time, I can feel it happening. It's almost like you give your team permission to come back, and the other team feels that, and that energy. So it's the same thing in life. Reading this book, you give people permission to go after what they truly want to go after, not just the steady paycheck and the bottom line thing. So
100%. And I think, without going through the whole details of everything in the book, one of the biggest reasons why people really justify not going for it, so to speak, and pursuing who they really could be in the world, is fear that it won't work out.
Yeah.
So it might be worth doing like a quick spoiler alert on the book, because I know that you're probably not finished with it yet.
Nope.
But the way that it starts is with kind of the classic moment in baseball, right?
Yeah.
It's like the pinnacle of my career. We're
pretty cool.
Yeah, we're hosting a regional. It's like on ESPN, ninth inning. We're down by 3. And anyway, I end up really being able to execute on something very specific with a plan, right? Hunting a pitch in a certain spot, hitting a big home run at a big time.
Thinking about it your whole life.
Thinking about it my whole life. You can't get into that batter's box without thinking about it your whole life.
Yeah.
Like the whole thing. It's
Agreed.
a peak flow moment,
Yep.
right? And very classic. Now, I know that people haven't finished the book when they come up to me and they say, "Dude, I love the book, man. The walk-off in the beginning is crazy." Whatever. Because they said that word, the walk-off in the beginning. So the book opens up in this regional, and if you don't really follow the details super close, the home run ties the game in the top of the 9th.
Yeah.
It's the peak moment of my life.
Yeah.
It happens in slow motion. Like, it's a chills kind of thing.
No,
Well, I was the tying run. The next guy hits a 3,000 hopper to the third baseman. It's the third out. We go to the bottom of the 9th, and 9 minutes later, we lose.
Yeah.
So, and I tell you that at the end of the book.
Yeah.
So to have a peak human experience of flow, just categorically, you're in outer space. The work that goes into that, the feeling surrounding it, all those factors, becoming redundant 9 minutes later.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sort of begs the question, like, was it worth it?
Yeah.
Like, does that fact make going on that pursuit redundant? And this is the whole point of the book, is I'm saying not only are you in a utilitarian way, mathematically, more advantaged to pursuing your best self, I'm also saying that even if you don't make it, it's still worth it.
I agree.
Because the experiences leading up to that moment are like serving me right now.
Yeah.
My whole life and everything I know about it and everything I've created is informed by that thing. right? And so what a hall pass to say, not only should you go for this thing, guess what? If you really go for it, you don't even have to make. I wasn't a big league player.
Yeah.
I got the call on the freeway as a baller.
Yeah.
That this is a wrap, you know? So to me, that's sort of like the nail in the coffin. And the way that's described in the book is that those who pursue these pursuits have some certain characteristics or amenities that you can't learn any other way. And the fifth and final one is that these skills are highly transferable.
Yeah.
You know, so whatever frame you want to look at it through, you know, a lover, a friend, you know, an employer. Who would you rather hire? Who would you rather walk down a dark alley with? Who would you rather be buddies with? Who would you rather marry? Someone who is willing to explore their edge, understands commitment at a rich level, understands a large body of deep work, resilient to adversity, the pursuit of flow, or someone who has justified their whole life that it's much safer to avoid all of those things.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, that's super interesting.
To me, that's a wrap.
Yeah,
you know?
no,
It's
I know.
very obvious.
It's
who you would choose.
I know. I'm right there with you. I mean, I think, you know, again, living with passion is everything, right? Getting that feeling to where you're like constantly not chasing, but like going after something. And you have, like you said earlier, you referenced, you know, the book, you know, Living with Meaning or Man with Meaning.
Yeah, a man's search for meaning.
For meaning. I mean, just knowing that you're like have a North Star the whole time is just so darn important. So
yeah,
totally get it. So book so far is great. I'm going to finish it.
Thanks. Thanks for checking it out.
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. I was fired up when I saw it. I'm like, oh dude. I mean, you know, I've known you since we were little, dude.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think about like what it looks like now. Awesome.
Yeah, I trip out on it. It's pretty surreal. Like, I've mentioned yesterday I ran into Kevin Dalla, you know, like a neighborhood friend last night, and he was like, "Hey man, I read the book. It was really good." And I was like, "Oh God, like, what did I write in that thing?" It's like kind of like a vulnerable.
No, it's
thing,
good, but that's again, it's the same thing. You have to be vulnerable for it to be good. If you'd have checked out mentally, it wouldn't have worked. So, So we kind of finish with, you know, I mentioned to you a little bit, funny baseball stories. Because look, I mean, you know, life on the road and life as a baseball player can, you know, just spontaneously things come up that you could never plan or put into a scene. So I'm curious if you have, you know, one that you can share that.
Yeah. So I appreciate the heads up on this one because I probably would have botched this.
I've blown it so far on a couple, so I'm something I'm working on.
I got a good one that isn't as spontaneous. It was quite conniving and planned. So I'll set the stage here. It's a baseball-oriented April Fool's joke. Okay. And I pulled one of the better April Fool's jokes I've seen pulled, and here's the context. So it is 2008, so I'm a senior. You know, we have allegedly the best pitching staff in the country. My roommate is a guy by the name of Brian Mattis. Yep. He was the first pitcher taken in the 2008 draft. Golden Spikes finalist, or I don't know if he won the thing or not. Second or third overall pick.
Orioles?
To Baltimore.
Yeah.
Best college player in the country.
Yeah.
He's the Reggie Bush of college baseball at the time.
Yeah.
Okay. And we're partway through the year, and I am privy to a certain amount of information as his roommate, including a couple key facts. So Brian, love the guy, was taking the minimum amount of credits, 12 credits, to be eligible in the NCAA.
Yep.
One of these classes, and Brian's a smart guy, great kid, but he had a public speaking class that was a little stressful. Yeah. And let's be honest, he's going to be a millionaire in 60 days. So he decided he's going to bang it. Yeah. And he's just not showing up to this class. All right. So I'm like, this is good info. All right. So he's not showing up to this class. Professor Samba, I believe is the name of the professor. And so April Fool's is coming around. I love a good prank. April Fool's is tough because everybody's on high alert, right? Mm-hmm. So here's my plan. I go up to the athletic department and I get some letterhead. Official letterhead. It's got the SD on the top, looks
Yeah.
really official. And I write a letter that says, it's from our assistant athletic director, Mike Matoso, who is a baseball guy, so I figured it was a little safer than going with the head guy.
Yeah.
So it goes, Dear Brian Mattis, I have to inform you with great urgency that has come to our attention that you have been dropped from Professor Samba's Public Speaking 101 class on such and such date. Therefore, dropping you below the minimum required 12 units, and you are now presenting 9 units. And the NCAA has ruled that this is in violation of your eligibility, and therefore you will not be able to start Friday against University of Washington. Okay. Please report to my office immediately so we can resolve this matter as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And it's signed Mike Matoso, and I had printed it out.
The letterhead.
I did the thing with like the signature, the whole deal. And I put this in an envelope and pin it to, we'd get all our like scouting cards and transmission like this on a bulletin board in the locker room. And so I pin it to the locker. And this is in a time where, we're trying to make all these classes. It was a day where I got to leave practice early to go to this class. It's a 3-hour class, not many people in the class, so I can't have my phone on. And I pin the thing, set the thing in place, and then I go to this class. And thinking I'm just being funny. I'm just like all giddy in class, 3 hours long. I know the practice is ending. About an hour later, I'll be getting out of class, and we'll have a good laugh.
Yeah.
And so I come out of class and turn my phone on, and it just like it's doing the upload of like all the voicemails, all the text messages, and it's just like chronologically I'm experiencing this as like, oh dude, he like found the letter. Oh dude, he's opening it. It looks like he's gonna cry. And then like, hey bro, you should probably call Brian. Then it like devolves to like, hey bro, gotta call Brian. And then like SOS, like just the whole thing is happening.
And you're in class right now.
Yeah, and so I just come out of class and I'm getting all these texts or whatever. And so to give context, at that time in this career, there'd be 100 scouts, agents, team owners, GMs, all at the game. It would have been almost like national news if this guy can't start on Friday, right?
Yeah.
And so I come out of class, I'm getting all these messages, and I immediately call Brian. Rings once, rings twice, goes to voicemail. I'm like, fuck. He's like screening my call.
Yeah.
So I call him one more time. Rings like half a time. And he answers. He goes, what, dude? And I'm like, hey, bro, like, what's up? And he's like, I can't really talk right now, man. I'm stressing out. I'm in Matoso's office. Like, I'm so screwed, man. And I'm like, dude, what's going on, man? And he's like, fuck, I can't really talk, but like, that speech class I've been blowing off, like, they dropped me, man. Like I'm fucked. Like I can't pitch on Friday. Like I gotta go. Matoso's out to lunch. He's gonna be back at any point. I gotta go. And he's like on the verge of tears. And I'm like, dude, don't hang up. And he's like, what? And I was like, get out of there. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, get out of the office. Leave, quick. And he's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, I wrote the letter. And he's like, what? I'm like, I wrote the letter. It's April Fool's. You're an idiot.
Oh my God.
And he goes, why the fuck would you do that?
Oh my God.
Why the fuck? And so he leaves or whatever. And luckily before Mike Matoso comes back. And so anyway, we have a laugh about this thing. Yeah, we have
I can't even imagine.
We have a laugh about this thing, but it gets better because now we all sort of know the liability that is this thing. So Brian has to write the most embarrassing email of his life to Professor Samba, which went something like this. Professor Samba, my name's Brian Mattis. You probably don't know me because I haven't been to your class. I just want to make sure that you're going to fail me this semester instead of giving me an incomplete. Just confirm that you're going to fail me.
Oh my gosh.
And then so the professor writes back, I'm not sure what you're asking for here.
Exactly.
And so we had a good laugh about that. We went out there in pregame, out there with the hitters on the turf getting ready to go, and the stands are getting full, and the pregame things are happening at the field, and I see Mr. Mike Matoso walking down the steps, and I'm kind of nervous or whatever, and I see him out of the corner of my eye, and I know that he's going to mention something to me. And all of a sudden he gets about halfway down those bleachers, the ones you've seen.
Yep.
And he goes, Gelbrich. And I'm like, oh. And I look up at him and he just goes, double fist pump, like, the greatest ever. And I felt like in the clear, like, good to go.
You're good
So,
at that point. Oh,
yeah.
That's funny, man.
For a moment, the best player in college was allegedly ineligible.
Yep. And freaking out about it.
Yeah. And freaking out about it.
That's
So we have a
awesome.
good laugh about that one.
That's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
look, man, known you a long time. Super awesome to see all the things you're doing. I mean,
Yeah.
proud isn't the right word because we're around the same age, but it's awesome to see you just kicking butt and
Thanks.
taking names out there.
Yeah,
And,
likewise.
yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. This is long overdue. I'm glad we were able to do this and
Yeah.
keep at it, man.
Let's do it
it's
again.
Cool. We will.
Let's drink all the coffee together.
Yeah, exactly. God, your setup's amazing. God, by the way, the coffee setup in his place is A+.
Thanks.
Can't
dude.
even mess around with it. So
Thank you.
all right, man. Good stuff.
Yeah, thanks.
Cheers.
Cheers.